five of us.
Julian will be joining us.
Yes.
Karen.
Oh, Karen will be coming to us.
I'm not sure she is, but we're okay if she comes, I think.
I have to leave by 5:30ish.
I hope it doesn't last as long as my first. But to listen or
Yeah,
yes.
okay. Oh, yes, yeah.
It's good.
What's the meeting?
Yeah.
Meeting about the citizens.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm still tall where I go, but I think I'm going to listen to this.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's- Yeah, that's forum.
We got the sun.
Yes.
Yeah, is it too sunny? You must be so right, you might be head.
Right, we're going to start. I know we're 4 minutes late, but hey, it's a sandwich time. Settled in?
Yes.
Good afternoon. Finance and Assets Working Group meeting. First time we've met for a substantial period of time. One of the reasons for that has been the now presence of Julian, who's joined us today. So welcome, Julian. Good to have you here with us. Do you know everybody around the table?
I do. I just met Councillor Gray and the rest in the
We met for the first time. didn't we?
Yes, just now.
Good, good. So Julian's involvement will be pivotal for a number of reasons, I think, in terms of this meeting. There's two halves to this meeting, which always good that there's two halves rather than more or less halves. We've got, the first part is looking at the terms of reference for this working group, because I do want to have a discussion about delayering this working group and moving an amount of the responsibilities into the committee, and that's the Finance and General Purposes Committee, primarily because Julian is now on board. Some of those terms of reference activities also will just go to Julian to take forward and take into the committee. So hopefully we'll have that conversation. And then the second half, which will be in confidence, is to take a report from Julian in terms of the work that he's currently doing on the assets. Okay? So, apologies for any absence. We've had an apology from Councillor Green, travel commitments. And the rest of us are here now. So if we go on to the next agenda item, which is agreed the minutes of the previous meeting, whilst it is a substantial period of time ago, the actual draft minutes were circulated within a couple of weeks of that meeting, so people will have an opportunity around the time of the meeting to respond. So I just want to see if anyone's got any comments before we approve them. No? Okay, so those are approved. Public participation. I don't think there's anybody here that wants to talk apart from us, so we can move on beyond that. So agenda item 5, sorry, I did miss the actions. Can I just go through the actions? I'll just reverse slightly. Sometimes when you go too fast, you need to do. Right, so in terms of the actions, we had 4 actions outstanding from the last meeting. So the first one was working group members to consider any suitable co-optees that could be invited. So that one's still outstanding, and that might be reviewed in light of maybe a changed scope of this working group. The working group to consider developing a register that lists assets of community values in Sandwich. We'll pick this up when we get onto the terms of reference and Julian's role. Colin, you to check with the town clerk that the permanent employee role can be advertised as well on the basis we've got somebody. I think we can close that one. And the final one was that Peter was to update the asset status sheets with Danielle. Some work was done on that and it has been handed across to Julian, who will work in his own version of what suits him. So I think that action can be closed as well.
Well, I will be, sorry, can I just say, I will be working, it was Councillor Green that came up with the original sort of layout, wasn't it?
Yes.
So although I've done my own at the moment, it's just easier to visualise, I will be using that template for each of the assets as I go through it.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so Julian's had all the working group products, and now that it's in post, it will fall to him to develop a set that comes to the committee and then on to STC. Right, so the first main agenda item is to look again at the terms of reference in light of Julian's said to him that depending on this conversation, we may end up with a narrow scope for the working group, and I wanted to step down from being the chair, but remain on the working group as a committee member. And I asked him if he would take over the chair of the meeting, and he's agreed to do so. So my view would be that Peter should be allowed to do that unless anybody's got any objections to that. What it helps is it draws a line between myself being the chair of the STBF Finance Committee and this being a separate working group that sits beneath that of FNGP. So if everyone's okay with that, yeah, the next meeting will be down for Peter to take control of. So within the terms of reference, we had a number of purposes that we originally agreed, and maybe to some extent we were naively wanting to boil the ocean, and we made some progress on some aspects, but I think there's quite a lot of work here to do over quite a lengthy period of time, and I'm sure Julian will illustrate that when we have the conversation about the assets. But we had 5 bulleted actions that the working group were going to own. And the one that I think that still needs to remain within a working group structure is to review the relationship between the Tollbridge Fund and the Town Council. It's an amount of work that Karen, as Finance Officer, has already done and shared with us around this. But Peter particularly has a desire to do more around this, and I'd like to hear what it is that we can do as a working group to add to what's been done so far. So I would be recommending that we keep that within the working group. But I think the remaining items are all up for discussion where they might sit, whether they stay here or go into the committee column. So the first one, beyond that, was to carry out a deep analysis of future income streams and expenditure for Sandwich Town Council, including a review of all income raised by STC and FTBF estate, including Guildhall and forecourt fees, rents and other charges. So my personal view on that is that's quite dissected into a number of actions that already sit within the committees. But I'll stop there and open it up for anybody else's view, because my personal view is I think it becomes a committee owned, because it's already owned at committee level. So Colin, particularly as chair of FNGP, I don't know what you think.
I think the first bullet point is important because we've been talking for some time about the complication that the Tollbridge Fund and the STC relationship causes. And I think I was talking to Christina actually this morning about this. I think that was only changed 3 or 4 years ago, but what we need, the complication for me goes back to the lease, the Guildhall lease, where it talks about the leases to STC and jointly and severally the Tollbridge Fund. My view is that we need to really examine that in some depth and try and separate the two. And because we've been talking for some time about the new financial software package and better presentation of accounts, simpler accounts, which is something we need to talk through with Karen, perhaps outside of this meeting, but not within committee, but in a separate meeting. I think that, the first bullet point I think is critical, because it is too complicated. The transfer of money, my view is that we should have the Tollbridge Fund standing alone as a separate charity with STC in charge of all the assets, certainly the Guildhall asset. There might be very sound reasons why the Tollbridge Fund should own other assets for purposes of applying for grants and so on. But outside of that, this meeting, I think we need to look at that bullet point in some depth.
So I think, Colin, that sort of reinforces the point I said that Peter's really keen that we retain that and do more work on this. So I think this should stay within a working group environment rather than it being a committee item at first call.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think the other
That's absolutely right, I agree.
the other bullet points could well come within FGP and be incorporated as part of their work.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of the future of this working group, I think it should continue indefinitely. Perhaps not doing the kind of labour that we were doing in the past or should have been doing, because now Julian is here. But I think Julian would appreciate having some forum where he can, discuss ideas, talk about proposals and outside of the formal committee structure.
Yeah.
So I think we should carry on being his kind of mentor or guidance forum for the longer term.
So I would support that, so long as one, Julian is content with that. But secondly, what I wouldn't want it to become is a governance step, i.e. that you have to report into the working group first to get sanctioned or else it just becomes a third layer of governance.
I see.
Everything will have to go to STC ultimately.
Yes.
And I don't want this working group unpicking stuff to then have it unpicked again and then again. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly. There's been too many delays on too many things already. So.
I think yes. I mean, I haven't come from the same background. Usually decisions are made much quicker.
Yeah.
Which is obviously a benefit as long as all the information is provided. So whilst I appreciate this is obviously vital to sort of run ideas past everyone and discuss. It's trying to reduce the time between realising there's a problem with an asset and actually dealing with it, rather than it just sort of falling aside and not being picked up maybe for another 2 or 3 hours.
So I think, Julian, I would make it clear to you that this is not an additional step in your governance route to get a decision. Okay? So and Peter will determine how often we meet, but I think it is an opportunity for you to come to a group of people who can share ideas, problems, with, to seek views, but no more than that.
Yes. Yeah, it's a sounding board where, say you have an idea about a certain asset, you can bounce it off us, and we, because we're in touch with the other 12 councillors, can say yes, it's a good idea, or no, it's a non-starter. So,
for me,
it stops you wasting your time.
You say that I think there's certain ideas that people probably have their own very focused ideas on certain assets, not necessarily now but going forwards as well. If there are new assets we want to run, I think for me it's been able to put the point across of what I'm looking to achieve, but it won't necessarily flow with what other people are looking for themselves. So.
Yes. Any comments from your perspective?
Yeah, I think I agree. I agree with Colin on this. I think that's the right way forward.
Yes. Thank you. Danielle, anything else? So let me just play that back. In terms of the responsibilities of the working group, we will focus on the first bullet that's listed there. The remainder will go into the committee, save for the fact the review of the assets sits with Julian himself. So whilst we have an overarching responsibility at committee level, you are the person who will be developing the proposals and providing reports into that committee. Okay, thank you. I think the remainder of the terms of reference pretty well stay as they are, but I will do a read through before I do a report to FNGP, Colin, unless anybody else has seen anything else actually that needs to be discussed here. Because the same membership will stay the same, so the numbers will be staying the same, etc. And I'll propose a change of chair to the committee to agree or not. Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Sweet. Thank you. So that covers that agenda item. We've gone to agenda item 6, which is a confidential matter. So I'll just read out the statement that I need to make, which is under the Public Bodies Admission to Meetings Act 1960, extended by Section 100 of the Local Government Act 1972. The public may be excluded from a meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 by virtue of the paragraph specified against the item. And what we want to cover in confidence is information relating to assets that is commercially sensitive in nature and details that are confidential that relate to tenants. The property manager, Julian, will present a detailed verbal report on his review of assets, highlighting the risks, issues and opportunities identify from his work so far, and this will be ahead of a agenda item that's been tabled for STC next Monday. Okay? And can we take a vote on that? Does everybody agree?